Hi folks, Jason Barney, one of your directors here. I just wanted to take a quick minute to shoot something that is totally related to the point of what you're doing with NEH and its local history. So we're filming underneath the Chimney Point Bridge. The Chimney Point site is over here to my right. Fort Ticonderoga is down Lake Champlain or up Lake Champlain to the south. And behind us, we have the ruins for Crown Point. And I just wanted to give you a heads up that all things are connected. Teaching in Swanton, Vermont, up on the Canadian border, the French settlement that's here at Chimney Point, and then the French settlement that's over at Crown Point is kind of directly related to my home area because there's a French sawmill that is set up in Swanton in the era of the French and Indian War, and the local history up in Swanton is that the French sawmill gets burned. Relating to the Revolutionary War, my neck of the woods up on the northern section of the lake is also directly related to this because some of the material that you've talked about or some of the material that you've read about in class, there's the Quebec invasion in 1775 into 1776. And as the Americans are retreating, they come over the water of Lake Champlain, and it's on Crown Point where orders are given by some of the American generals to burn Metcalf Sawmill, which is a sawmill up in the neck of the woods where I teach on the Missisquoi River. So I just wanted to give you this real quick snippet of information about how all things are connected. And as a local history teacher, I love to try to connect the dots to my students where there's historic sites here, there's historic sites here, and all the way up in my hometown, there are definitely historic sites there as well.
Hi, my name is Jess Robinson. I'm the Vermont State Archaeologist. I work with the Vermont Division for Historic Preservation. I'm really happy to be talking to you today about a special place, Chimney Point in Addison, Vermont. Chimney Point was extremely important in the historic period for Europeans and later American settlement, for conflict, for trade, for prosperity. But it was equally, if not more important, for thousands of years of native people in this region. Chimney Point, at the Narrows of the Lake Champlain, dividing what some people call the northern portion of the lake from the southern portion, facilitated very easy trade across a short canoe paddle or across winter ice. It facilitated communication, occasionally conflict. It was an important place for fishing, for hunting of waterfowl. It facilitated travel into the interior by all of the important waterways coming around here. And because of that, it's left a very rich archaeological record that I'd like to talk to you more about now. For archaeologists, the best dating technique we can utilize, at least currently, is referred to as radiocarbon dating. Radiocarbon dating takes organic material that has preserved at a site, often for thousands of years, and through a scientific process gets an absolute date in the past with an error range. But in the absence of radiocarbon dating, archaeologists can use different material culture or the things that native people made as indices or as indicators of particular periods in the past. And one of the most important for those of us in Vermont and in adjacent portions of New England are changing spear point and eventually arrow point styles through time. We can say within often a 500 to 1,000 year period when a spear point was made, and therefore roughly date the site within which it was found by the style or the shape, what archaeologists call the morphology of the spear points through time. So the earliest native people that we understand entered the Champlain Valley arrived approximately 12,500 years ago. At that time, Chimney Point itself was under the waters of an inland arm of the Atlantic Ocean geologists, archaeologists, and environmental scientists call the Champlain Sea. It was very cold, but those waters hosted a variety of marine mammals, such as whales, seals, walruses, marine fish, mussels, and other bivalves. And while Chimney Point itself wasn't habitable, areas farther to the east along the shores of this inland sea do demonstrate that Paleo-Indians were aggregating on the shorelines. They were preferred areas to camp and to dwell perhaps seasonally. And although no direct evidence has yet been found by archaeologists, we hypothesize that native groups were likely taking advantage of these marine resources, perhaps hunting marine mammals, certainly probably gathering fish and shellfish as they moved through the Northeast in their seasonal or periodic rounds. What archaeologists refer to as the Archaic Period followed the Paleo-Indian Period, a somewhat unfortunate or at least antiquated name. But the Archaic Period marked the disappearance of the Champlain Sea and the establishment of Lake Champlain like we know it today. Here, for the first time, Chimney Point became dry and habitable, and archaeological excavations at the site show that even the earliest early archaic inhabitants made use of this newfound landform to come out. It was probably a very important place for fish, which became endemic in Lake Champlain and the adjacent waterways as the rivers finally cut into their banks and stabilized. Early fishing technology has been found here and elsewhere. The Archaic Period also shows the establishment of specific tools for woodworking as forests grew up out of the former tundra and trees and woodworking became important for the lifeways here. We have found tools for making canoes and other woodworking tools at Chimney Point and in areas around here. And those canoes, in turn, would have facilitated travel across the Narrows of Lake Champlain, as well as for hunting and fishing. The arrival of the Woodland Period, which archaeologists date to roughly 3,000 years ago, marks a couple notable changes. Perhaps the most important one, at least archaeologically, in that it greatly increases the visibility of native archaeological deposits, is the discovery, or at least the adoption and use of pottery. The first pottery in the Northeast was quite small, often friable and fragile, but was probably imbued with a good amount of ceremonial and social importance. And pottery is important for archaeologists because it also preserves things like charcoal for radiocarbon dating within its matrix, or the negative impressions of fabric, so we can reconstruct how fabric was woven and the materials from which it was made in the past. The early Woodland Period, from about 3,000 years ago to about 2,100 years ago, also marks a period of interregional exchange of non-utilitarian or socially valued goods. Things that were often not made for utilitarian tools or spear points or other implements, but things that were used for adornment or to make ceremonial or socially important items. Things like pipes made from stone in the mid-continent, galena used for paint and pigment, copper that was often made into beads or necklaces or bracelets, and toolstone that was made into large spear point-like implements, but that were probably never intended for hunting or any other mundane purpose, but rather were probably made to be used in specific ceremonies. And this interregional exchange is really the first of its kind north of Mesoamerica. and it connected the Northeast to far-flung areas of the eastern woodlands, the subarctic, and sometimes even the Arctic. The middle and late woodland period follows the dates from around 2100 years ago until the arrival of Europeans, roughly 1550 in the Champlain Valley. Obviously, the firm date is 1609 at the arrival of Samuel de Champlain in the traditional histories, but Native people were likely indirectly experiencing the effects of European contact elsewhere on the continent through indirect trade exchange, communication, and information being carried. The arrival of the Middle Woodland Period at roughly 2100 years ago shows a real increase in the production of pottery, a real expertise being evinced in the way pottery is made. Different styles, shapes, forms indicate that pottery was being used for a variety of purposes, not only just cooking, but storage and processing and transportation. The late woodland period is very important because it heralds the arrival of traditional corn, beans, squash, agriculture, minimally in the Champlain Valley and along the Connecticut, as far as we understand thus far. Unlike Iroquoian groups to the west, the Abenaki and Mohican folks living in various portions of the valley did not likely live in villages year-round, but rather still continued a seasonal round. But agriculture did bring people together in larger population densities seasonally through the planting and harvest, and corn, beans, and squash greatly altered and enhanced the diet while still relying on hunting and fishing and gathering for a variety of resources.